Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello, my name is Kevin Tudor, and I'm one of the three hosts of Almost Major, a film podcast dissecting many major indie studios and the films they release. Every week, myself, Charlie Nash, and Bryden Doyle discuss overlooked, forgotten, or bona fide classic indie films via studio-specific miniseries. We've previously covered numerous films from Artisan Entertainment, Lionsgate Films, and New Line Cinema. Titles including The Blair Witch Project, American Psycho, Dogville, But I'm a Cheerleader, Saw, Requiem for a Dream, and Ringmaster, you know, the Jerry Springer film. Anyways, we have a fun time every week, and we hope you will join us. Subscribe to Almost Major wherever you get your podcasts. Now proudly a part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Welcome to the Kulturecast. I'm Chris Stachiw, and I am joined this week by a very special guest co-host, Matt Campagna. I spoke with him a couple months back for his film that he co-directed with his brother, 6 Reasons Why. How are you doing today, Matt?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. I know you are soon to be directing a zombie film.
Yes, the next movie on my slate's a post-apocalyptic Civil War zombie western.
So we were talking and felt it unnecessary to talk Return of the Living Dead with you, since that'll you can talk zombies, and about your film as well. So it kind of ties in perfectly.
That's synergy. I like it.
Yeah, that synergy is right. So like I said, we're going to be talking Return of the Living Dead, and we have an interview with Thom Mathews, who played Freddy in the film.
Amazing.
But before we, he's one of the main characters, I guess, of the film.
Yeah, he's like the sympathetic zombie, if you will.
Yeah, right. He's the bub of Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, Matt, have you been watching anything this week?
Interesting. I just managed to catch up on the most recent season of Walking Dead, appropriately enough, because it just found its way to Netflix. So I didn't have to steal it. I got to watch it in the sort of official and paying the creators capacity. So I was very happy to wait for it to be on Netflix. And so it's very appropriate for the next film I'm making, the film we're talking about today, and it's coming out again for us when we're at the time of recording. The next season comes out in a week, so very exciting.
Yeah, I watched the first season of the show. I could never get into it, I guess. I don't know why. I get why people like it. I'm kind of curious, as a filmmaker, do you think that kind of the zombie bubble is gonna burst sometime soon, or do you think we're kind of safe right now from that zombie bubble kind of bursting?
The thing about the zombie bubble is that zombies are a force of nature. And as long as the story being told deals with that force of nature, it doesn't matter if it's an earthquake movie or a hurricane movie or a zombie movie. If the story is about the characters and the people and the depravity and the goodness that's in the human spirit when that force of nature strikes, if you're telling a good story, that bubble doesn't burst. It's when people are just doing a zombie movie to have, slashing and brains and no good storytelling. Nobody wants to watch that. What you want to watch is a movie that tells you something about humanity. Then it goes deeper, then it's cooler, then bubbles like that never burst.
Yeah, I mean, that I think that was kind of the issue with the, I guess, vampire bubble, right? Is it kind of burst because people just stopped giving a shit about the stories that they were telling.
Yeah, it didn't help that they started with a shitty story. Like, when, but interestingly enough, I mean, Vampire Diaries is going along quite nicely. Whereas, you tell a crap story using, crap source material, and you wind up with a crap movie. And, yeah,
and that,
it really comes
that
down
crap
to the story.
Movie you're talking about is what is it, Twilight, I'm assuming?
That may or may not be the one I'm talking about, yeah.
Beating around the bush a little bit.
Just a touch.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you'll get any disagreement out of me that Twilight is awful. And I've seen I've seen one of them. I forget which one. I think
Oddly
it was
enough, the third one has a really great opening sequence. It's directed by the same guy that did 30 Days of Night, and the opening sequence of the third Twilight movie has some great horror elements. It's quite cool. And then you very quickly remember you're watching a Twilight movie, and it goes downhill fast. But it was off to a good start, I gotta say, compared to the other two. That's at least. I really petered out on that one. I never even finished the series. It was embarrassing. The only good thing that came out of Twilight was 50 Shades of Grey, as far as I'm concerned. So.
Well, there you go. Class E.
Yeah, right. Going from one great source material to the next.
Yeah, it's just like if you can find less and less literate people to write books, they do better and better. I don't understand.
Yeah, right. For me, I haven't really been watching anything this week. I watched the season finale of Rick and Morty, which is an awesome show. I don't know if you've seen it or not. If you're into sci-fi, and it's like, do you know anything about it?
No, I don't.
It's imagine if the premise of Back to the Future. So Doc Brown and Marty McFly. Imagine if Doc Brown was like a raging alcoholic, and Marty McFly was his grandson, as opposed to just some like random kid that he meets. And that's kind of like their adventures. And that's literally the premise of the show. It's created by Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, and Dan Harmon has obviously created, Community and a bunch of other really kind of highly praised comedic stuff. But it's really great. If you've never seen it, it's really something worth checking out. It's funny and it's smart, and there are a lot of kind of nods to sci-fi movies and horror movies. So I think it's
really time travel-y?
It's not time travel-y as much as like dimension hopping.
Okay,
and
that sounds fun.
Yeah, it's really cool. If you've never seen it, I mean, I know that I think almost everyone at Culture Shock that writes for the site is a huge fan of it. So I don't know,
cool.
our seal of approval for whatever that means.
That goes a long way.
Yeah, but other than that, I haven't really been watching a whole lot other than Return of the Living Dead.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about Return of the Living Dead. Was released in 1985, directed by Dan O'Bannon. Dan O'Bannon had previously written Alien and also Total Recall.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of a legend in the kind of sci-fi world in regards to just coming up with really awesome scripts. So this was him behind the camera, and the IMDb synopsis of the film has been two bumbling employees at a medical supply warehouse accidentally release a deadly gas into the air. The vapors cause the dead to rise again as zombies.
Something strange is going on.
Did you see that movie? Night of the Living Dead.
Sure.
They ship those bodies east. Well, say hello.
The dead have risen from the grave.
Mister, there's 100 of those things out there.
How many did you say?
100. And now the question is, how do we get them back into the ground?
So, Matt, had you seen this film before, and what are your thoughts?
I feel like I saw this when I was like 8. But I hadn't seen it in a long time. And when I was watching it, I was like, holy shit, I watched this when I was 8? Because, the legendary naked zombie, I watched that when I was 8. Okay, amazing. So one of the great things about my dad giving me the card to the Jumbo Video down the street that said I can rent anything of any rating I'd like, because my dad was like, yeah, whatever, watch Commando, watch Basic Instinct, whatever, put hair on your chest. And I was amazed that I watched this when I was 8, but it all came flooding back to me as I was watching it. Although now that I write and direct films, it was really interesting to watch this and realize that the structure of this movie is really lopsided and strange. The first act took like half the movie. And the whole time I was watching it, I was like, okay, any minute now, there's got to be more than one zombie in this movie. And then it just kept going and going and going. And then the buildup on something like that, these days that movie the first 38 minutes of that movie would be like 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes.
Right.
And the fact that we meet this army general, we meet Glover, and then we don't see him for an hour and 10 minutes was also kind of shocking. Like, it's an interesting 80s structure to films where certain things that these days we take for granted as like a formulaic, okay, now we need to get to that story, then to this story, then to that story, just didn't happen, which on the one hand, hats off. That's interesting. Strange structure. On the other hand, as a viewer with sort of a sense of structure, it felt like the opening act was just really way too long.
I kind of agree, actually. I hadn't seen this film in I can't remember when I watched this. I want to say I watched this film like 5+ years ago, maybe more than that. I remember at least watching it like in high school when I finally kind of started getting into horror films. Yeah. And horror is my favorite genre. So, I consider myself an aficionado of the genre. And when I first saw this movie, I kind of fell in love with the zombies and the way that the zombies work, because the zombie mechanics in this movie are really unique to this film in a way that a lot of other zombie films don't even think about. And when you look at the way that the zombies work in this film, you kind of wish that every other zombie property did it that way, because it's a way that makes sense theoretically.
Well, it's weird. This is the movie that invented the brains idea for zombies, which is pretty interesting, especially when you actually try to explain why they have this desire for brains, which I found pretty thin, but it was interesting to have it there. The half zombie lady, the animatronic thing was very cool. I liked the actual production design of the physical zombies. I found interesting because they had this movie came out a couple of years after Thriller, so there was already that look of a ghoul that you'd want to go with, and so there were some of those in there. But then there was the actual legless zombie. Like, they had amputees running around in this film, and you're like, holy shit, that's not a puppet, that's a human. Amazing. Like, things like that really brought the production value up, and it's really just hiring a person who's has no legs, and you've got an actor who's actually differently abled, and all of a sudden is adding a premium quality to your film. It's very cool. And then, of course, the straight up animatronics, like that the half zombie that they tie up, and then the mix. The one that they find in the basement that is like a skull with a tongue and eyeballs, but is a human underneath it. You can tell it's the awesome tar man. Yeah, the slimy tar man. Yeah, really interesting mix of zombies. Which, on the one hand, it was the most uneven world building rules I've seen in a zombie film in a while. But on the other hand, zombies that pick up CB radios and order up more dinner is an interesting and different idea. That's the idea that you can have a rational conversation with a zombie. Definitely different. They don't act particularly dead. But the thing I found weird was that the very first cadaver we meet exhibits none of those traits. And so you're really shocked when one of them can have a conversation, when the first one you meet is just growling and snarling and painted yellow. So super duper uneven production design, but strange and interesting choices, which I appreciate. Yeah, I think that, and I think that this is really a credit to Dan O'Bannon, who, he passed away a couple years ago, and he's someone that I would have genuinely loved to talk to, because, coming up with Alien and then kind of, like you said, this is the first time that the idea that zombies eating brains was kind of brought into the pop culture
zeitgeist, I guess, really.
Yeah, that groaning of brains comes directly from this film. It's had some interesting impact.
Yeah, and most people don't know that. Most people just think that that's kind of, if you're talking zombies have always been, they've always wanted brains, and that's just the way it is. But it comes directly from this film.
Yeah,
and
it's
I
only
think
a 30-year-old idea, which is interesting.
Yeah, and the kind of, like you said, some of the rules are a little muddy.
Yeah.
Which, it is a horror movie, and I like that they even have rules.
Yeah, they could have bent it even further if they wanted to. But you're right, there are some rules, but they certainly stick to the rule of the original film, which is that at the end of the movie, the only way to solve this problem is to have a larger military / policing organization show up and wipe it all out. And
right.
Not even that works. So it's an interesting pattern in that way, but it's very strange that it's almost a sequel to Night of the Living Dead, but it considers Night of the Living Dead to be a movie, which is very interesting. The fact that John Russo had his split with Romero after Night of the Living Dead, and one of them retained some of the rights and one of them retained some of the other rights, was strange to begin with. But, Russo really wanted to make a movie that had almost none of the political commentary and deeper meaning that you get out of Night of the Living Dead.
Any Romero post Night of the Living. Any Romero zombie movie has some of that socio-political. It's not. I don't think it's bad, but that's just that's classic Romero, right?
Yeah, and that's the great thing about a zombie movie. When you tell a zombie movie that's more than a zombie movie, if you tell one that is an allegory that actually tells a human story, you wind up with something a bit elevated. And I think that's why Night of the Living Dead is remembered as something so special. Whereas, Return of the Living Dead invented, what's the word? Splatstick, I believe, for the kind of humor that's in it. It's one of those things where, the gore and the brains oozing out of a head and all that stuff is there for fun and amusement, as opposed to being sort of balanced with a socio-political message or a higher meaning, really. And I think, you were saying that you tried to watch The Walking Dead, and the first season just didn't grab you. And it's interesting because that show has moments in it where it tells that noble story in an interesting horror language. But then there are moments where they're just, ripping a zombie in half because it's cool looking. And so the balance of that in the early seasons, I think, aired more towards, Darabont had a Führer-like grip over the first season, so he did whatever he wanted. But then after that, it started to get into more allegory and more metaphor. And by the time the fifth season hits, it's all allegory, and it's really some heightened storytelling, which is pretty cool. You have to really hang on to get through the grimier, low-budge parts of the first and second season. But The Walking Dead tells that sort of heightened story. And the one thing that, as a 35-year-old filmmaker, watching Return of the Living Dead doesn't do, which is tell a heightened story. And, doesn't mean everyone sets out to do that. But for me, as someone who, when I write a movie for the Sci-Fi Channel, it has allegory and a message and something really important at the heart of it, and then we kill a bunch of mutants in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. But to me, that balance is where really heightened and difficult, challenging film happens. And every now and again you're watching Return of the Living Dead, and it's just really good frigging puppeteering and awesome blood splatter and naked stocking wearing lady zombies and stuff like that. But I think the world needs a good balance.
Well, yeah, and I would say that the movie, and unlike a lot of zombie movies, and this is something I've talked with this month a couple times already. Zombie movies and horror movies in general, horror comedy is really hard to do.
Oh yes.
And because sometimes with a film like Elvira, it's just all comedy, no horror, and some of the horror feels tacked on. Or sometimes you get I mean, this film is horror comedy, but I think this film kind of goes farther into the horror than comedy. It's very black humor, black comedy. I mean, at one point, a character self-immolates himself, which was very interesting. I thought that was a cool. That was kind of one of the most interesting moments in the film for me as a storyteller, because, you know, you see that character as this sort of weak man, as this sort of, people, when his boss tells him, be a man, in this, very 80s machismo kind of way. And now in the 21st century, be a man has this real, violent masculinity and toxic masculinity is a scary thing in North America right now. So that moment where the guy who is told to be a man makes the bravest choice of everyone in the film when he realizes he's a danger and just wants to put himself out of his misery and stop other people's misery. He doesn't want to eat someone's brain and make his pain go away. He just wants to stop it. It's interesting. That's a brave, almost out of place moment in this film because it's so meaningful. It's quite cool.
And that scene was actually changed. Initially, they wanted to have the character of Frank. The character of Frank was supposed to just become part of the zombie horde.
Oh.
And the actor was like, I don't want to just become part of the zombie horde because I don't want to work outside in the rain.
Oh, yeah. Shit, that's right. I remember that. It's a great idea. So
instead, he was just like, oh, let's just have me get burned alive. And Dan O'Bannon's like, yeah, sure. Okay.
Wow. Well, there you go. The coolest moment in the film was by accident.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But I think you're right about horror comedy and the idea that it's not an easy balance to hit. I mean, An American Werewolf in London kind of invented the genre, and I don't know that anyone has ever, because American Werewolf in London is frigging terrifying and is goddamn hilarious, and that balance is not easy to do. I mean, you've got stuff like Tucker and Dale versus Evil. That is funny and yet also scary as hell in moments, and there's been some good modern work like that, but I really think American Werewolf in London kind of created the genre and set the bar pretty high.
No, I would totally agree. What I do like about this movie is this movie has something that I personally enjoy. Aside from kind of there's some black humor to it, especially the ending is really, with the character self-immolating himself and then the military getting involved and more or less just nuking Louisville, Kentucky. Yep. This movie has a kind of punk rock sensibility to it.
Yep.
That I think is one of the best things about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has a really rock. There's a lot of rock soundtrack, and there's some punk rock music, and then the characters, the characters of Freddy's friends are all kind of these people that you would have seen at a punk rock show in the 80s.
Yep. Although there's that weird Olivia Newton-John character that's one of their friends for some reason, and you're like, you stepped out of Grease. Why are you in this movie? But
right.
But Freddy's girlfriend has to be the clean-cut one, right? And so it was really interesting to see the way they tried to balance the zeitgeist of people at that time with an audience at that time. And I really wonder what people thought. I wonder if punks of that moment, when they watched somebody with, chains and leather and a wacky mohawky haircut say, do you think this is a costume? This is a lifestyle. I wonder if they looked at that and were like, man, they're really appropriating our culture. That sucks. Or if they looked at that and they were like, yeah, that's awesome. That's me. I'm seeing myself on the screen. I wonder what that kind of, when you read about critical reception, very rarely will you hear what a 16-year-old punk thought about the film in 1985, but it's the kind of thing where Ebert will tell you what he thought. But I'm really curious what the punks of the day thought of watching this.
Right, because you're right. The character of Suicide, the one who gets murdered by Tarman, gets his head bitten off, or the top of his head, I guess, bitten into.
And I was shocked that Suicide didn't get up as a zombie. The world where you can die and come back as a zombie unless you were eaten by a zombie is an interesting world. That's really different because normally when you're bitten by a zombie, you are one. So it was really strange to see that I was watching moments where I'm like, oh man, any second now, and then things just don't happen.
Well, and the one character, Trash, does come back as a zombie.
Eaten by a zombie, comes back as a zombie. So, like, the world is really uneven, and the rules are not clear, but, that doesn't make it not fun.
I totally agree. I think that, I think that because of the way that they did the rules in the film with, this idea that at the beginning, obviously Freddy and Frank accidentally blow this container open. And this is something I really did want to talk about. I kind of forgot. You mentioned that this is a sequel in a way to Night of the Living Dead.
In a way, yeah.
Right, because the film Night of the Living Dead is supposed to have been inspired by this true life event that the Army was involved in. And I think that is such a cool kind of meta before meta was a thing that people think about now. I mean, that's totally meta, right?
Yeah, it's the sequel to the fictional source material for a film that exists in our world, which is neat because it makes this movie exist a little bit more in our world. One of the biggest problems I've had with any zombie movie I've ever seen is that it exists in a parallel universe where they don't have the word zombie. Like, when you watch The Walking Dead, they have come up with 5 years of different words like roamer, bleeder, groaner, biter, walker. They have so many names for zombie that isn't zombie. So obviously the AMC world that they've built is not our world. It's a parallel universe where they do not have the word zombie. They do not have the movie Night of the Living Dead. Like, that I always find so weird. That's one thing I'm looking forward to about doing a historical zombie movie, because in the movie's called Undead Redemption, and in this movie I don't have to even once worry about the fact that the word zombie is only a Haitian voodoo word. It's great. At that time, there were no zombie movies, and even in Night of the Living Dead, they only used the word ghoul.
Right. Well, and I think that's something that another horror comedy that I think is close to being that perfect balance of horror comedy, Shaun of the Dead. They do something really kind of smart in that movie where the characters don't say zombie.
Yeah.
And some of the characters try to say it. They're like, no, like, don't say it. Like, don't say it. Don't say zombie. Because
when you hang a lantern on it like that, it's funny. It's cool. It works well in a horror comedy to hang a lantern on the fact that the word zombie is never said in a zombie movie. It's an extra gag that you can use throughout the whole film, and Shaun of the Dead uses it beautifully. But, that's always troubled me about zombie movies. They never have the word zombie.
Is that they refuse to call them zombies?
Yeah, it's like the world will somehow not be as real. If Zack Snyder were to make a Superman movie called Superman, somehow it would be less gritty and brutal because it's called Superman. We'll call it Man of Steel. And the way Chris Nolan became afraid of the word Batman and started releasing movies that were called The Dark Knight this and The Dark Knight that. It's like, oh, come on. Your character's named Batman. Don't be afraid of that. It's weird when people are almost embarrassed of their source material.
Well, it's because they're, I don't, in Return of the Living Dead, I think that they do a good job of not falling into that trap.
Yeah. And you know what? The fact that it's a sequel to a movie that never used the word zombie, that buys it a little bit more credence to not use the word zombie. But, in 1985, we were getting that word.
Right. Yeah, no, totally. Well, let's take a little bit of a break so we can play the interview that John had with Thom Mathews, who played Freddy in the film. And when we get back, we'll continue talking about the film.
That sounds awesome.
So what initially drew you to the zombie film Return of the Living Dead?
Well, what drew me to the film was the script. I was a young actor, and I was looking for a job, and was lucky enough to get hired in that part. It was a very long process, some legal issues with the name of it, and my initial reading was, by the time I read and by the time we actually completed the casting was 9 months later. It was a 9-month process.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty long, like I said, they had some legal issues with the title, and they had to get that worked out.
Mm-hmm.
But then I went in, they called me back 9 months later, and the next thing I know, I was reading for my girlfriend, which Beverly ended up getting that part. And I didn't even know I was even casting it at that time. They just had called me in again. So I thought I was just auditioning once again, for the part that I had already been cast.
And what when they finally told you that you were cast as Freddy, what was your reaction to that?
Well, Well, it was, at the time, it was the biggest part in a movie I had ever done. I'd done one bit part in The Woman in Red prior to that. And I was pretty excited because the role, it's got a really great arc to it. Start off as this innocent punk rocker who just has a job, and I end up being a brain-sucking zombie at the end. So it's a great arc. It's a great arc of the character within an hour and a half. It's really a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that casting as Freddy affected your future career?
I think. Well, I got part 2 because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, in part 1, we all died because they nuked us. And from what I understood, the Japanese wanted us to come back. The Japanese distributors wanted us to come back, so they insisted on Jimmy Karen and I coming back in part 2. So we got that, and then I also got Friday the 13th right after that, probably 6 or 8 months after that. And I don't know, the inner workings of all that, but it probably had something to do with me getting up.
Did the filming of that second movie differ in any way from your time on the first film?
The difference between part 1 and part 2 for me was part 1, I think, is genius because you're laughing at the situation that we got ourselves. It's a very dramatic piece, acting wise. But what's so funny about it and hysterical about it is the situations that we're in. I mean, I remember watching it for the first time. Even to this day, I watch it, and the scene where we're cutting off the yellow corpse's head. I'm laughing, but I can't look at it at the same time, so I'm like laughing and turning my head at the same time. It's a really weird feeling. I've never felt it in another movie ever since. And part two for me, the jokes were in the script, the little jokes and stuff like that, which I think it took away from the genius of part 1, but I wasn't, I was just, like I said, I was just a hired hand.
Right. Now, to talk a little bit more about the movie itself, you mentioned your character's arc from, a normal kid that's working his job to becoming a brain-eating zombie. The makeup and the physical effects for Freddy as a character change over the course of that arc as well. How did the sort of process to get into all of that special effects evolve as the film went on?
Well, we were able to. Dan did a smart thing by having everyone rehearse for 2 weeks before we started principal photography. So you kind of, when you're shooting a script, you usually don't do it in order. You jump from one place to the other depending on what's going on and what the sets are. And if you have to go back to one set, if they have one set in the beginning and the same set at the end, they'll probably try and get that all at the same time so they don't have to move the whole production company back and forth. Mm-hmm. So the process is, in your mind as you're creating it, you kind of emotionally figure out where you're at in that scene, and you just kind of play it to that, those emotions and what the situation is. Like when we're dying, I love that scene when the blood is starting to pool up and the paramedics come in and they say, we don't have any blood pressure or pulse, which is, kind of funny. But it was kind of a cool scene. And so you just kind of, for me, I just kind of, looked at the pages, looked at the scene before that, what we were shooting, and I would look at the scene after what we were shooting to kind of get in the emotional space of where I needed to be for that particular scene.
Mm-hmm. And then, so you mentioned the order that they film shots in usually takes place based on, a set location or what is the most efficient way to film the movie. So was there any point where you went from the sort of pale, sick version of Freddy to the version that didn't have eyes?
No, we shot all that stuff at the end pretty much. So that was pretty confusing.
Gotcha.
Because once we started doing the makeup, because the makeup took so long, it took me about an hour and a half, 2 hours to put the prosthetic on my eyes and stuff like that. So that's time consuming. When the producers are figuring out the day out of days, it's the schedule of the movie, when things should be shot, I think they figured all that, the timing of all that, and because it takes a lot of time. But pretty much the end was pretty much shot at the end of the movie. But I didn't go from the sweet kid to the zombie, and like even within the same week, I don't think. It was 30 years ago.
Right. So how did your interactions with Dan O'Bannon and the rest of the cast, how were those on set?
Dan and I, we had a really good relationship. You know, it was really unusual for a writer-director to let the actors in on the collaboration of the movie, because usually when you're a writer, you write things specifically and you kind of have a hard time letting go of how you see it. Mm-hmm. But he was able to, you know, he wanted our ideas. He wanted us to take what he wrote and make it our own. And by making it our own, it made it truer to us, which made it better, I guess. Made it more honest for every actor. And that was my experience. Now, I understand that some people didn't have the same experience with him, but he was very generous with me and Jimmy Kim. I mean, a lot of the stuff we just kind of ad-libbed because of the situation we were in, and it kind of, you know, he never said no. I can't remember a time where he said no while we were shooting to me, and that was pretty cool. I kind of thought he saw himself as my character. You know, if he were my age, he would have cast himself as my, because he had I don't know, he kind of took me under his wing and just let us do what we wanted to do. And it was his, I think it was his first directorial debut, or maybe his second film that he had directed.
When you get gassed towards the very beginning of the movie,
yeah,
what was the gas made of? Because it's clearly green and it's, you know, there.
I don't know what it was, but I think if they color, you know, they have gas. They send gas through all kinds of scenes. They'll send, forget what the name of it is, but sometimes you'll see a whole scene or just be kind of this smoky kind of area, a smoky kind of area, and they use it as a certain type of gas. So I think what they did, they just colored that same gas. It wasn't anything specific. I don't even. It may have even been dry ice. I don't know, colored dry ice. You know, don't remember. But yeah, that's a cool scene where we kind of drop and then Thom Man evaporates and comes out.
Yeah, that's a very cool practical effect that they did.
Right.
So do you have any sort of stories that pop into your head when you think back to your time on the set of Return of the Living Dead?
I just, you know, like I said before, I was driving one day to work and someone, I was living with my grandmother at the time because my mom and dad got divorced, and we were shooting for like 2 or 3 weeks, and I asked her something, and she said no, I could, and I was like driving to work. I go, God, I haven't heard no on the set. So, you know, I came to realize how special that was, even later on as I did other things, because how collaborative that was. That he allowed us actors to be a part of that. You know, it was the first time in 2 weeks I had heard no, and it was like, oh, I see. And, you know, it was fun. Jimmy and Karen and I had a lot of things together, and he just had some great stories. For me to hear his stories, you know, because he was on Broadway. He was in Streetcar Named Desire as a gentleman caller on Broadway with Brando and stuff. And he knew Jason Robards was a good friend of his, and he just had a lot of great stories. And so that was a special time.
Well, are you working on anything now that you'd like to talk about?
I'm not working. I have a construction company I've had for years. I was actually doing construction. I've always kind of done it. I was doing it in high school, and my dad was in construction. My grandfather was in construction. So I've always kind of done it. Now I have my own company. And I stopped auditioning because it was costing me too much money to go on audition at some point. Like, you know, 15 years ago. It didn't really make sense anymore. So that's kind of taken off. I've done some great projects with a lot of people in the business, and, you know, some really great creative stuff. You know, one of a kind stuff. Like one client, we cast their daughter's fists in bronze and made them the front door hinges.
That's cool.
It's just that job just went on and on like that. The woman was very, very talented and had a lot of money, because that to do that at that time was $20,000. It was a big job, you know. And so we do custom homes and remodels and things like that. So I've got a bunch of employees that I deal with every day. So I get up in the morning to do. I take my kids to school and drop them off, and then go to work, make their rounds to different jobs. And that's basically what I've been doing for the last little bit. My kids are grown. My oldest is 16 now. My youngest is she's 11. My dad has 2 boys and a girl.
All right. Big thanks to Thom Mathews for sitting down and talking with us about the film. Matt, I'm kind of curious. We've been kind of talking about the plot of the film. What did you think of the practical effects? Because this is a pure practical effects film, which for someone who's a fan of practical effects like myself, I love 80s and 70s and 60s films because they're all just practical effects.
That's all they've got, yeah.
What do you think of the kind of use of practical effects in a film?
Here's the thing. For me, I really hate it when any piece of fiction that's going to play in impossible ideas relies on only one kind of effect. And the great thing about Return of the Living Dead is that they use so many different effects to make zombies feel real. Whether it's just makeup on the ones who just look like ghouls that have risen from the dead, that was great. But then they hire a Muppet specialist to not only build and operate this great live action man-in-suit puppet, but then they also have an animatronic half zombie that is strictly animatronics. Every bit of it that moves is robotic. And then, just when you think they've used all the best tricks in the world, they hire a differently abled, amputated actor to run around with no legs. And it's like, okay, you have used every possible trick in the book to convince me that zombies are real, and I bought it. I loved it. It was great. It really makes up for those interesting little moments, like when the first smashing of the tank happens, and that pouring of paint down the sculpture of a zombie face is like, okay, we're watching practical effects. This is the 80s. Okay, I remember now. And then they go into these beautiful, well-executed effects for the rest of the film. The yellow bastard from Sin City got me a little bit worried at the beginning when all they had was a guy painted yellow for their first ghoul. And I thought, okay, I remember this movie being better than this. And then it immediately elevated from there. But yeah, the only complaint I've really got about the whole movie is the lack of production design and the lack of thought that went into the design of that first ghoul. He was weird, man. I was not expecting a bright yellow bastard.
Well, and I guess that's supposed to be someone who is dead and they were yellow because of the way that they prepared the body?
Maybe, but it's tricky because when that's going to be your first zombie, if you're going to set the stage with that character, it's difficult. You really have to explain why he's different and strange if he's going to be different and strange, or you got to make him look like the other ones that we're going to now be expecting. That was the one point in the whole film, and unfortunately it was in the first 40 minutes of the movie, that I thought, I don't know about this. But then the back half of that movie friggin' delivered. But yeah, the first half was uneven and strange in that way.
Yeah, I didn't kind of understand what it was going for, really. It was supposed to be like a dead person, but it just came off as campier than everything else and really sticks out.
And it's arguably the best preserved body you see in the whole film, except for, red-haired naked zombie. And for it to have no vocabulary, and that's our first zombie. Again, we're setting the world, we're building the world, we're setting the stage. And for them to not have that character speak and call out for brains, and to not have that character look like every other zombie we're going to see in any way, very weird. Very weird choice.
I do like, though, that whatever this gas that comes out of the barrels, whatever it is, it brings everything that was dead back to life, including these bisected dogs that are used for medical, medical students. And they're these bisected dogs that are just sitting and panting and barking. It is just...
That was so cool. I agree. That was a creepy but cool moment. I also found it interesting that all the skeletons that they talked about so much in the opening scene do not get reanimated. That was weird.
Yeah.
It's like, if you can cut off the arms and legs and cut off the head and it's still moving, what in this world you've built, what is controlling that?
Right.
Because you just had a skeleton pull itself up out of a grave twice in this movie. They used the same effect, and I just thought, okay,
the hard rock skeleton.
yeah. It's like, what is your rule? When is it dead? Because they made it clear that those were not plastic skeletons; those were actual skeletons in a medical supply place. So, yeah, very, very strange world building and strange choice to not have certain things come back to life when other things do, because they had the effects to do all kinds of great puppet work and great makeup work. Practical effects across the board were strong, but yeah, that was the weird choice for me when they employed them.
Yeah, I think and I hate to use this phrase, but I know that you as a filmmaker can agree with me that sometimes filmmakers are guilty of doing this. I think what it really boils down to is just a bad case of plot convenience.
Oh, absolutely. It's all just sort of deus ex machina. This works, that doesn't work because we need to expediently get through the story. Yeah, absolutely. But that's the thing about good. The thing that separates a good, fun film from a great, brilliant film is everything feels true, everything feels natural, nothing is a leap that makes no sense. And there were a good number of leaps that make no sense in this film. But again, I don't feel like Russo's goal in a zombie film is the same as Romero's goal in a zombie film.
No, I totally agree. To me, his goal was to, and also attribute some of this to Dan O'Bannon. I think they wanted to tell a fun story, not a super serious allegory for the Vietnam War or racial inequality or what have you.
Well, and when you consider the fact that in 1968, they were telling a story that dealt with so much interesting racial tension and stereotyping and so many cool things that were challenging to an audience. There's virtually nothing challenging in this film. There's one character of color that has any kind of actual role in the film. I mean, sure, you've got the guy at the end who punches in some buttons, but really it was Spider. It was Miguel Nunez was like the only character of color who had agency in the film. And he just doesn't measure up to Ben. Ben is that character. Dwayne Jones just made that such an important element. His performance was fantastic, and as the lead character, it was a wonderful thing to watch. But yeah, Return of the Living Dead just didn't touch on any of that. So clearly the secret sauce is Romero.
Yeah, and I think again, if you really want a film that has that allegory, and this is not the film for you. This is more of a, hey, look, this is some like wacky shit.
Yeah, I mean the tagline of the movie is "They're back from the grave and ready to party." So it's clearly a different kind of as a zombie
spray painting a tombstone.
Yeah. So it's a very different kind of zombie film. It's just interesting that Russo and Romero split the rights to Living Dead the way that they did, because Romero was allowed to make, in continuity sequels, and Russo wasn't. But Russo was allowed to use the word "of the living dead." He was allowed to use that phrasing in a way that Romero wasn't until later on once they've sort of patched up whatever their falling out was after the first film. So it's really interesting that the spirit of the first film is totally lost in this in name only sequel. And yet the fact that the rights are split makes for such a strange kind of storytelling.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about the storytelling and some about the effects. What did you think of the performances in the film?
It was neat because as I was watching it, I couldn't remember who my main characters were going to be, and I couldn't remember who I was going to be following. And so early on, you connect with certain characters and you dismiss others. And, Clu Gulager's character was a very interesting, 80s machismo kind of hero character that you expect to, at least now in our sort of postmodern world, you expect to get his just desserts early on and you learn about the character. But the idea that he just becomes essentially the driving narrative, it becomes his story, because I thought it was going to be Freddy's story. I completely forgot that Freddy just, deadheads out and becomes a beast. And as you're being introduced to, the kid is usually the one that is going to go on the hero's journey. So I thought the performances made every character feel like a hero. And I thought that was really cool. And it was neat that the character of Spider sort of comes up from behind. You sort of dismiss him because he's just part of the punky group. And then he very quickly takes a leadership role, and I enjoyed the way Nunez played that because, he's just he doesn't upstage anyone, he's just one of the gang. And then you see in the story that his character persists and becomes more of a leader and, doesn't overtly take the leadership. I love the way Nunez made it something where when he was told, what are you suggesting? And he said, hey, man, somebody else should make some suggestions. I thought that was really neat that it was that he played that character as a survivor, but not one that took on leadership, but had it thrust upon him. Was really cool. I enjoyed his performance in that way. And then, the James Karen, I thought, had kind of the best moment as Frank when he made that decision to just immolate. Just burn himself up in the crematorium. I thought that was actually a touching moment. And, you're not quite sure what to make of that character for the whole film. And then his sort of noble sacrifice at the end makes it almost about his character. It's a very cool ensemble piece. I really enjoyed the performances in that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're totally right. The idea that there aren't, you're not really given until maybe towards the last third of the film, you're not really given a character to root for because they're all kind of given something to do, I think is something that really works well for this film, because in a lot of horror movies, it's kind of, here's the group of people and they're all going to get killed off piecemeal one by one. So don't get invested in someone or you're going to be disappointed.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that this film kind of does that. And there's something to be said for that, but I'm glad that this film doesn't do that specifically.
Yeah, and you've got the character of Trash that at the off the top in the first act, she's stripped herself naked and is prancing about in typical 80s misogynist fashion. But you've got that moment where you're like, okay, well, I guess in the 80s, this promiscuous-looking character is just going to die. And then, she does, and she dies in the horrible way she describes, fittingly enough. And then when she comes back and you wind up watching her just rip some people apart, it's pretty satisfying. I also liked the prosthetic they had on her jaw to make her look inhumanly hungry. I thought that was pretty cool. And they only showed it for glimpses. So you never felt like it was a prosthetic. You felt like it was something just messed up and what's wrong with his character? This is awesome. So I thought that element was quite neat in Quigley's character in Trash.
And the like we've been saying, the bait and switch with Freddy, who ends up becoming a zombie along with Frank, and then Freddy kind of towards the end of the film just becomes a straight villain.
Oh yeah.
Because they're able to keep the other zombies at bay outside of the funeral home, but Freddy is locked inside with them.
Yeah.
And so it kind of just goes full villain in the last 20 minutes of the film, trying to chase down Tina and eat her.
Yeah, which I thought was a really cool narrative choice, because you really sympathize with this character, and you've been, they had the cadaver at the beginning of the film that was a nice little setup to rigor mortis and all of that. And I thought that was a good narrative choice. And then when you see that all this is happening to Freddy, you're like, oh man, I went from liking you to really liking you. Now this is horrible. And then he turns. And I thought, as much as the idea that he closes his eyes and wakes up and decides it's time to eat brains, weird choice, but still a cool narrative structure for a character to go on an arc like that, where you go from rooting for him to feeling sympathy for him to just being terrified of him. It was great.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the ending of the film. It is outside of our statute of spoiler limitation, which is 5 years.
Well outside. That's fair.
Yeah, well outside. So the end of the film, Bert calls the number on the side of the military drums, and it goes through to Colonel Glover, who you talked about kind of is not in the film for most of it. And Glover finds out that in one of the funniest lines of the film, that the Easter eggs have hatched.
Yes, I love that they refer to them as Easter eggs. Oh, it's
right.
good.
And so they have a containment protocol, which is a nuclear shell that is shot from a giant howitzer cannon.
Yeah, which, I'm sure is a acceptable way to launch something 224 miles.
Right.
That was crazy.
And the final scene of the film is, Bert kind of being like, "What's that noise?"
Yeah.
And then it kind of like freeze frames as soon as it hits, because Freddy breaks through into the attic where Ernie and Tina are, and it just freeze frames and everything gets blown up, and there's a shot of like the nuke going off and houses being destroyed.
Yeah.
But then there's the outcome was Glover has voiceover that says the outcome was optimal. Less than 4,000 people are dead. The rain should wash everything away, and the president is going to visit the area the next day.
So good.
Yeah, which is obviously then there's a shot of kind of the whole process happening again with the zombie, I guess, vaporized zombies going into the rain and it being washed down again.
Yeah. And I found it interesting that the audience is privy to some of the mechanics of the I guess spreading disease that the characters aren't. I thought that was really neat, the idea that we know what's going to happen and nobody else does. And it's not telegraphed so early. You think maybe this nuke could do the job, but then as soon as you see that lightning and that thunderstorm, you're like, oh, wait, I see what you're getting at. It was quite neat. I enjoyed it.
And, you were talking about kind of some things that you had an issue with, like the rules of the film. Something I had an issue with was the characters don't understand how the zombies are spreading. And I feel like they should have realized at least a little bit that, hey, us lighting the zombie on fire and its ashes going into the air might have had something to do with it.
Yeah, it was interesting that they never get wise to that. Because I guess if you're going to have one of the main characters have a conversation with the general, and we basically sat there as an audience and watched the general or the colonel write down everything that we had seen in the movie. And then at the end of it, if that information had been shared, again, it's just the convenience of the storytelling. If that information had been shared, then the colonel probably wouldn't have launched the nuke, because that's too much. It's too much of a massive version of what they did to the first school. So, it's again, it comes down to convenience. The characters can't be aware of that, because then the ending of the movie doesn't work. It was strange. Again, it just goes to the strange, uneven. Let's make sure the mechanics of the film serve the movie ending when we need it to end.
Yeah, and that was, I can buy into plot convenience only so much, but when they're like, we don't know how the zombies are spreading, I was like, oh, come on. Like, even if I were in that situation, I would be like, well, it was probably us burning the body and the rain.
Yeah. I mean, it became pretty clear, although I guess they did a pretty good job of keeping the people who were aware of the acid rain and the people who were aware of the burning zombie corpse separate, so that they never have a conversation about how acid rain seemed to bring the zombie up. But still, even then, that's thin, because the audience watched the main characters in the crematorium look outside and say, hey, look, it's raining. So, you can't let your characters be privy to some information and then watch them not make that leap without thinking, okay, these characters are dumb.
Yeah. And that was the one thing that my kind of main issue is. So the conceit at the end of the film is that all the characters are dead, which is pretty dark. Going along with the black kind of comedy of the film, all the characters are dead, all the zombies are dead, and then more zombies are made because the other zombies are vaporized.
Well, that was interesting, because they do keep that sort of theme of kill the main characters by more important authority. from the first Living Dead film. So I guess they managed to play a bit of an homage to their own film.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't know if you know this, but there are, I want to say 3 sequels to this film.
Yeah. There's at least 4 films in this Return of the Living Dead group, I think.
And none of them follow the characters from the first film, or anything from the first film. It's just, it has to kind of do with, the next film has to do with the military, and then some of the other ones just, the concept gets muddied. After the first film was so successful, Don Calfa, who played Ernie, the funeral home director, he penned a sequel to the film called Revenge of the Living Dead that had nothing to do with Return of the Living Dead Part 2, and it had some of the characters surviving from the end of the first film. Obviously, his character, Ernie, survived. Casey, Chuck, Tina, and Spider, and it further reinforces the black comedy of the film where the military hit close to optimal, but they didn't kill everyone because it's the army and they fucked up. And so they're trying to figure out a way to fight and kill the zombies.
Amazing.
But that never happened, unfortunately.
It's so great that he wrote that.
Right? And it was turned into a graphic novel, and the graphic novel is super hard to find, but I like the idea that if there was a sequel, a true sequel to this film, it would have been the military screwed up because it's the military.
That's interesting.
And, you know, that would have further reinforced the kind of the black humor aspects of the film.
That's funny. Yeah, that would have been great. Although apparently, I just checked out, I just thought I'd check out Calfa's Wikipedia. Apparently, he was supposed to come back, but not as the same character. He was supposed to come back for Return of the Living Dead 3. He was set to play the Colonel in that, but he had to pull out of production for personal reasons. So it's interesting that they wanted to bring the actor back 2 movies later, but they just were never interested in following the characters that they theoretically kill off screen. But I found him easily the most interesting part of the film. He was a great character. From the moment they introduce him, he's just this weird character. And then he almost has this psychotic break partway through the film when he starts to be really interested in what these zombies are about. I thought his character was very neat in that way. And then the moment where you think he might be about to shoot Freddy's girlfriend, and very, very interesting character all around. Very unpredictable.
And before we wrap up, that is a scene that I did want to talk about specifically, is the scene with the zombie on the table.
Yeah.
That is a scene that you don't really get to see in other zombie movies.
No, it's interesting. Often they get to even if it's that zombie Mars movie that came out a couple of years ago with Liev Schreiber, there are moments where you see the examination of the undead that can be really interesting, but very rarely do they have a full conversation with them. When, I guess I shouldn't say which character dies in the Mars movie, but in that film, there's a moment where you think there's going to be a conversation between an undead character and a living character, but it's just such a strange idea to have a zombie talk. And so they never really go right there. But this movie just goes right for it, whether it's a zombie talking on a CB, not once, but twice they did that in this film to order up more brains to eat. It was really strange for me because talking zombies are just not a thing. But in this movie, they are.
Yeah, and, I also think that scene, and this is something, again, that, outside of maybe Day of the Dead, it almost makes you feel sympathetic for the zombies.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it gives you that moment where when Frank decides to self-immolate, and you're like, yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense. It hurts a lot to be dead. Okay, I buy that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, really isn't a thing that you see in a lot of zombie movies. A lot of zombie movies, it's just, the zombies are eating people and they're bad and they're vicious and there you go.
Yeah.
And in this film, you don't get that. You get these zombies are trying to do this for specific reasons.
Yeah, it sort of goes back to my force of nature analogy. They aren't a force of nature in this. They have motivation, and you can imagine them achieving a goal, which would be eating a bunch of brains. And so, the idea that humanizing the zombie is a way of keeping the zombies as the only villain is interesting, because that's not the structure that most zombie movies take. Most zombie movies do take the opportunity to pit human against human. Those are the stories that really resonate, at least for me, when you see what a human is willing to do to survive in that force of nature of the zombie apocalypse. And yet in this, there's never really a point where the living are at each other's throats until that last moment when the military decides to wipe out Louisville, Kentucky. But human on human violence is not a thing in this movie. It's all about the zombies being character enough to have a motivation, and the heroes are just trying to learn about them and put an end to the villains. And in this, the villains are only the undead.
Yeah, and like you said, I think that's just really surprising, because of normally, you're right, that is a huge aspect. I mean, especially in a show like The Walking Dead. I mean, that's something that they play for. I mean, they play that all the time. So
yeah. The Walking Dead is totally a force of nature show. Walking Dead could be a story about wild animals, and it would be the same story. It's just what happens when humans have a horrible thing that they need to fend off, and one human could sacrifice another human to better their chances of survival. And it's interesting that is never tackled in Return of the Living Dead. That's just not a direction to go.
Yeah, and that's I think that's just another kind of interesting thing that this film does and doesn't do, really. So,
there's that moment where Clue's character, Bert Wilson, he hops in the car with Spider, and they're driving away, and there's that moment where Spider and Wilson are in disagreement about what to do about their surviving friends. That was kind of the only time that it was sort of human versus human, and that kind of wasn't explored very much.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. So
yeah, it makes this movie different, which this movie is nothing if not different.
Yeah, that's for sure. That is what I would say. It is different.
Yeah.
But Matt, skip it or watch it, and best performance.
I would say watch it, because the straight up beauty of the practical effects in this film and the variety of practical effects. It's just something we don't get out of movies these days. The tactile nature of characters. And so for me, the best performance is totally going to have to go to Tar Zombie, slimy Tar Zombie. He's the best part of this movie for sure. His brains, he's the first one to really get that point across. And I thought his eyes and his tongue were so entertaining. I just thought, what a great performance. Everything about slimy zombie, I would say, best performance.
And I would have to agree that the Tar Zombie really kind of steals the show.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. He's also, I guess he would be the progenitor zombie as well, since he's the one that's let out of the container.
Oh yeah, he's patient zero, totally. It's all his fault.
Yeah. For me, obviously, this is a total watch. I think it might be, for me, one of my favorite zombie movies. I know that, it doesn't really do a lot of the kind of dramatic stuff that some of the other zombie movies that have come out since then or before then have. But for me, when I'm watching a zombie movie, I just want to see some zombies and some kind of black humor. So this kind of fills all those, checks all those boxes for me.
Yeah. And you know what? As entertaining and slapsticky or splat-sticky, I guess, as the violence is in this film, do be warned that there is full frontal all the way nudity. Like this movie is very different from the political and almost careful nature of Dawn of Night of the Living Dead, this trash just gets naked for kind of no reason, and it's just a little wacky. So be aware, maybe don't watch it with people that you're not so sure about their interest in full frontal nudity, or your children. If you don't want to watch it when you were 8 years old, like I did, just be warned.
Well, you're doing good. I mean,
I turned out all right, I gotta say,
Yeah. So, and for best performance, I'm gonna have to go with Clu Gulager as Bert, because like we were talking about, you don't know what to expect from his character at the get-go, because he just seems kind of like a dick, and then you kind of, because of the way this film works, his character becomes more sympathetic and just kind of more interesting character.
Yeah, he does sort of begin as a stereotype and of like a Charlton Heston character that you're like, yeah, well, he's going to die. And then he very quickly rounds a bend, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I like him now, because he does some pretty cowardly stuff, and then doesn't. So he surprises you. And I'd say that best human performance for me, I would say, is probably Miguel Nunez. His spider character, he is really good at not upstaging people, and then comes out from behind to be one of the leads. I thought that was really strong work. I liked that character quite a bit.
I agree. I think it's really hard to pick a performance in a film like this, because everybody puts in such.
Oh, it's such an ensemble. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? As much as the craziness of trash, Linnea Quigley's character just stripping naked, that's hard, man. That actress plays most of this movie completely naked, and that's vulnerable and not a nice thing to do on a set, when you consider the fact that James Cameron was like, yeah, it's wet out there, I don't really want to do this movie out in the rain, so kill me off. But frigging Linnea Quigley, man, she does it in the rain and naked in a set of dozens or hundreds of people. That's a vulnerable spot for an actor to be, and I think as unwarranted as her nudity may be, hats off, man. That was great work.
No, yeah, I agree. It's nudity, I'm sure, in a film is not easy, but then asking her to do what she did in this film is just, really hats off.
Yeah.
So with our opinions on record, Matt, what do you think the Rotten Tomato meter is at for the film?
Oh, okay. So I'd say the Rotten Tomato meter, the critic side, I would say is probably at like 30%, and the user side, I would say, is at like 70%.
The Rotten Tomato meter on the critic side is a 90%.
Wow! Well done, critics.
Yeah. And that is out of 31 reviews. 28 of them would be considered fresh. 3 would be considered rotten.
Great.
And out of the audience score, that would be a 79%. So it is actually lower than the critic score.
Wow, that's great. It's not often you see something that's this genre and honestly just out of the mainstream get that kind of critical response. But I hope those 30 critics, a lot of them work for like Fangoria and Rue Morgue. And then hopefully, we're stacking the deck with people who can appreciate a movie like this.
Right. No, I totally agree. I would not have thought 90% either, but I'm perfectly
pleasantly surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Matt, before I talk about this Thursday's Kulturecast, is there anything you want to plug or talk about?
Well, at the moment, I've actually got a show that I'm crowdfunding, because I've shot the first 3 episodes. It's called Tactical Girls. And it's a show about 3 crass women who work in a trucking company. And they just dressed up at night in military outfits to mess up their boss's property. And they're basically the female Three Stooges, but with a lot of swearing. And it's a frigging entertaining show that I got to do with one of the stars of Orphan Black, one of the stars of My Big Fat Greek Wedding, one of the stars from Carmilla. We've got a really great cast of people. And it's called Tactical Girls. We're doing a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter. And if you like either feminist, military, or hilarious things, you will find Tactical Girls right up your alley.
And how far along is your crowdfunding as of right now?
Oh, we've got another 2.5 weeks to go, and we're already a third the way there. So we've only been doing it for about a week and a half, and it's doing really well.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And the link for that is in the comments below, so make sure to go and get that funded, because I really like 6 Reasons Why, and I'm sure that anything else that you're working on is awesome as well. So
I think you're going to kick out of this one for sure.
Yeah. As for me, you can follow me on Twitter at Kulturestash, and make sure to visit Kultureshock.com to check out more Kulturecasts and movie reviews. We're right in the middle of Horrortober, which is our yearly October horror movie month, and the list was put together by me. So if it's bad, you can blame me, and if it's good,
you get all the credit.
Yeah, right. I will put myself. I'll hang myself out there for this one. And this Thursday on the Kulturecast, we're going to be talking about You're Next. It was a film that came out last year, and it is a really well done kind of horror thriller. So make sure to check that one out.